What if I told you that the most destructive person in any room isn't the cruel one, the selfish one, or even the manipulative one? It's the person who's always nice. You know the type. Never says no, always accommodating, avoids all conflict, puts everyone else first. Society calls them good people. Brené Brown called them something else entirely. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why this person destroys themselves and everyone around them, while people who've stopped being nice actually practice real kindness. Or maybe you're that nice person wondering why you feel so resentful and empty. But first, let me show you exactly what I mean. You walk into a situation where someone needs to hear a hard truth. On one side, there's Michael, nodding sympathetically, saying what the person wants to hear, avoiding the difficult conversation, classic nice guy. On the other side, there's Sarah, who says, "I care about you too much to lie to you," and tells the uncomfortable truth with compassion. Who actually helped the person? Hold that thought, because what I'm about to tell you will flip everything you believe about being good to people. Michael's niceness just enabled behavior that will destroy this person. Sarah's honesty just gave them information they needed to change. Michael prioritized being liked over being helpful. Sarah prioritized being kind over being nice. So why does everyone think Michael is the good person and Sarah is harsh? Here's the uncomfortable truth. You celebrate niceness because it never challenges you, never makes you uncomfortable, never requires you to face reality. Brown spent her career studying vulnerability and courage, and what she discovered was this. Nice people aren't kind. They're cowards using agreeableness as a shield against the discomfort of honesty, because they prove that everything we've been taught about being good to people is actually a way of being selfish while appearing selfless. But here's what Brown knew that nobody talks about. The person who stops being nice isn't becoming mean. They're developing the courage to be genuinely kind. While nice people avoid discomfort at all costs, kind people face discomfort because they actually care about outcomes. And that courage, that's exactly what separates people who actually help from people who just want to be liked. But to understand why, we need to dig into the brutal truth about what niceness really is. Brené Brown wrote, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." But what happens when someone realizes that being nice is usually being unclear? If you've ever felt resentful from being too nice, this video is for you. Like, subscribe, and let's choose kindness over niceness. Leave a comment about the last time being nice actually hurt someone you claim to care about. That's the person who stopped being nice. They're a walking challenge to comfortable lies. Has boundaries without guilt, says no without over-explaining, tells truth even when it's uncomfortable, prioritizes actual help over being liked, faces conflict when necessary, expects accountability from people they care about. And this terrifies nice people because if being good doesn't require constant accommodation, if caring doesn't demand endless self-sacrifice, if love doesn't need you to avoid all difficult conversations, then what does that say about the exhausting performance of niceness you've been calling virtue your entire life? But here's where it gets really interesting. Brown discovered something that explains why nice people actually do more harm than openly selfish people. And it has everything to do with the difference between niceness and kindness. Remember that uncomfortable feeling when someone stops being nice to you? Brown had a name for it, and once you understand what it is, you'll never confuse niceness with kindness again. Quick question. When was the last time you were honest about something difficult because it was the right thing to do, not because it felt good? Not avoiding conflict by being agreeable, not keeping the peace by withholding truth, not maintaining relationships by never challenging anyone, but actually saying something hard because the person needed to hear it. Can't remember? That's the problem. Brown discovered that our addiction to being nice isn't about caring for others. It's about avoiding the discomfort of being disliked, disagreed with, or seen as difficult. She called this niceness armor, the performance of agreeableness we use to protect ourselves from vulnerability. And in our culture, the biggest deception is believing that nice people are good people. But here's what Brown knew. We perform niceness. We say yes when we mean no. We avoid difficult conversations and enable destructive behavior. Not because we care about people, but because we're terrified of being seen as bad, difficult, or unkind. Think about your last act of niceness. Did it actually help the person, Or did it help you avoid the discomfort of honesty? The person who stopped being nice doesn't perform accommodation. They're not protecting themselves with agreeableness. They're not even trying to be liked. And somehow, this is the part that breaks nice people's brains. They often have deeper, stronger, more honest relationships than people who are always nice. Brown wrote, "Daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable. What makes you uncomfortable about people who aren't nice is that they dare to be vulnerable enough to risk being disliked for truth, that they care more about actual outcomes than perceived goodness, that they've stopped using niceness as armor. But what if they're not mean? What if the problem is your niceness is actually cowardice disguised as virtue? Here's what the self-help gurus don't want you to know. Being nice is often more selfish than being honest. Everything you've been taught about being good to people is designed to keep you weak and inauthentic." Brown wrote, "When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. Nice people feel this constantly, but think the solution is being even nicer. The genuinely kind understand something most never access. Real care requires discomfort. While you're being nice to avoid conflict, they're being honest to create actual help. While you're saying yes to be liked, they're saying no to maintain integrity. While you're avoiding difficult conversations, they're having them because they actually care about outcomes. This is why your niceness destroys relationships. You're not building trust. You're building resentment covered with fake smiles. Remember Michael from the earlier scenario? While Sarah was being kind enough to tell the hard truth, Michael was being nice to avoid discomfort. His niceness felt supportive in the moment, but left the person with no useful information. His performance of care was actually self-protection. Brown called this choosing comfort over courage. When you choose being comfortable over being courageous, you choose niceness over kindness. But here's the really crazy part. Nice people think they're sacrificing for others. They're actually sacrificing others for their own comfort. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation, you're choosing your comfort over their growth. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you're lying to protect yourself. Every time you enable bad behavior to keep the peace, you're prioritizing your comfort over their well-being. And that's exactly what makes niceness so insidious. It looks like selflessness while being profoundly selfish. Brown believed that the willingness to show up changes us. It makes us a little braver each time. Nice people never show up authentically. They show up in armor. And that armor keeps them from genuine connection, genuine help, genuine love. Now we get to the real reason society celebrates niceness over kindness. And it's not what you think. This isn't about being good to people. This is about social control. Brown wrote, "If we want to live and love with our whole hearts, we have to talk about shame." But society uses shame to enforce niceness because nice people are controllable. Think about it. Our entire social system depends on one thing: people who won't rock the boat. You need to be agreeable so groups function smoothly. You need to avoid conflict so institutions maintain harmony. You need to be nice so people in power never face accountability. The person who chooses kindness over niceness looks at this system and asks one simple question: why should I enable dysfunction to maintain false peace? And nobody has a good answer. They have authenticity without people-pleasing, boundaries without guilt, honesty without cruelty. This makes them socially difficult. Socially difficult people threaten systems built on everyone being nice. But here's the deeper fear that keeps niceness culture alive. What if everyone stopped being nice and started being kind? What if people started having honest conversations instead of comfortable ones? What if accountability became more important than avoiding conflict? If that happens, every dysfunctional relationship, every toxic workplace, every corrupt institution would have to change or collapse. They've been maintained by nice people who avoid conflict. And kind people who tell the truth prove that niceness is enabling destruction while claiming to help. The person who stops being nice represents proof that there's another way, a way that doesn't require constant accommodation or endless people-pleasing. Brown observed, "Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are." The person who stopped being nice embraced their authentic care for people. And what they found there didn't match the nice person performance society demands. But here's where this gets personal. Because Brown herself was the perfect example of what happens when someone stops performing niceness and starts practicing vulnerable authenticity. Brené Brown spent years researching what makes people truly connected and courageous. And her findings prove this. Nice people are the most disconnected. Accommodating people are the least authentic. Those who avoid all conflict have the shallowest relationships. Brown documented thousands of examples of nice people who were miserable, kind people who were fulfilled, the difference between comfort and courage. Sound familiar? That's exactly the pattern between people who perform niceness and people who practice kindness. But here's what Brown knew from her research. She had discovered something revolutionary. That vulnerability requires courage, not niceness. That boundaries are compassionate, not mean. That clear is kind, and unclear is unkind. And from that research came insights that changed how millions understand relationships. The power of vulnerability, the necessity of boundaries, the courage to be imperfect, the difference between belonging and fitting in. All of these concepts shape how we understand authentic connection today. They all emerged from research that revealed niceness as armor, not virtue. This is the pattern in genuine human connection. The deepest relationships involve people who tell each other truth. The strongest bonds exist where boundaries are respected. The most growth happens where kindness chooses discomfort over niceness. But niceness culture calls honest feedback mean because people who tell truth can't be controlled through guilt. The person who stops being nice today is following evidence-based understanding. And just like Brown's research showed, they're not trying to be liked through constant accommodation. They're trying to actually help through honest, boundaried, vulnerable authenticity. And that authenticity looks mean to people hiding behind niceness. Here's what Brown knew that our culture denies. Nice people are the most harmful people in most situations because they enable and avoid rather than help and confront. But maybe you're starting to recognize yourself in this description. Maybe you've been nice your whole life and feel empty. Brown wrote, "Courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. But showing up authentically requires recognizing these signs. Let me show you these signs. If you recognize them, understanding this will transform how you relate to people. First sign, you feel resentful after saying yes to things. Nice people say yes constantly. You agree to things and then feel angry about it. Every accommodation creates internal resentment. You're nice to others while being cruel to yourself. That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment that will eventually explode. Second sign, people take advantage of you repeatedly. Traditional niceness invites exploitation. You have no boundaries, so people push until they find them, which is never. You're always available, always accommodating, always there. And people learn to use you because you've taught them they can. Sound familiar? That's not you being taken advantage of. That's you refusing to set boundaries and then blaming others. Third sign, your relationships feel shallow despite years of connection. You've known people forever but don't feel truly known. Every relationship is surface-level politeness. You never have real conversations because real conversations might create conflict. Your niceness has prevented genuine intimacy. Fourth sign, you avoid necessary conflicts even when they'd help everyone. Someone needs confrontation, but you avoid it. A situation needs addressing, but you keep the peace. Problems fester because you won't have difficult conversations. Your niceness enables dysfunction you then complain about. Fifth sign, you say yes externally while screaming no internally. Your mouth says, "I'd love to," while your mind says, "I don't want to do this." The gap between your external niceness and internal truth is destroying you. You've become two people. The nice one others see, and the resentful one you live with. Sixth sign, you think setting boundaries makes you mean. You believe that saying no is selfish. You feel guilty when you prioritize yourself. You've confused accommodation with love and boundaries with cruelty. The result is that you have no boundaries and call it virtue. Seventh sign, your niceness disappears the moment you feel safe. You're nice to everyone except the people closest to you. With strangers, you're accommodating. With family, you're resentful and harsh. Your niceness is a public performance that you can't maintain in private. You've been taught these are signs you're a good person who needs to be nicer. You've been told that the solution to resentment is more selflessness, that boundaries are selfish, that nice people are good people. Brown would tell you to see these as symptoms. Symptoms that you're using niceness as armor. Symptoms that you're avoiding authenticity. Symptoms that you're being selfish while performing selflessness. When you stop being nice and start being kind, you gain access to genuine connection. Not the false harmony of never challenging anyone, but real relationships built on honesty, boundaries, and authentic care. This is why people who stop being nice have fewer but deeper relationships. When you're not maintaining surface-level niceness with everyone, you have capacity for genuine intimacy with some. This is why they seem more at peace. When you're not contorting yourself to please everyone, you can stand in your own integrity. But accepting this truth, that niceness is not kindness and might be destructive, that's the hardest part. Now comes the practical question. How do you stop being nice and start being kind? Brown believed that owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we'll ever do. But once you see niceness as armor, you need a framework for authentic kindness. First, practice saying no without justifying. Niceness over-explains every no, seeking permission to have boundaries. Kindness says, "That doesn't work for me," and stops. You don't owe anyone a justification for your boundaries. The word no is a complete sentence. When you stop justifying, you stop inviting negotiation of your boundaries. Second, distinguish between niceness and kindness in the moment. Niceness asks, will this make them comfortable? Kindness asks, will this actually help them? Before you speak or act, check your motivation. If you're trying to be liked, you're probably being nice. If you're trying to be helpful, you might be being kind. Comfort is not the same as help. Third, develop what Brown called the courage to be uncomfortable. This means having difficult conversations. It means telling truth people don't want to hear. It means setting boundaries that disappoint people. Kindness requires the courage to be disliked in service of what's right. Nice people avoid this discomfort. Kind people embrace it. But here's the most important part. You have to accept that kind people are often seen as mean by nice people. Society has confused these so thoroughly that authentic kindness looks harsh. Brown understood this. Her research on boundaries and authenticity was called harsh by nice people who preferred comfortable lies. You're not trying to be liked through niceness. You're trying to actually help through kindness. Your boundaries might disappoint people used to your accommodation. Your honesty might upset people comfortable with your lies. Your authenticity might end relationships that required your performance. And that's not failure. That's choosing real connection over false harmony. Think about it. Every authentically kind person is called mean by nice people. Brown herself faced backlash for saying clear is kind. Her boundaries were called harsh by people who preferred enabling. But when the results of her approach started showing deeper connection, healthier relationships, and actual growth, everything about choosing kindness over niceness became undeniable. Her supposed harshness turned out to be the only path to genuine connection. The same pattern happens over and over. The person everyone called mean for having boundaries suddenly has the healthiest relationships. Because while everyone else was being nice to avoid discomfort, they were being kind to create actual help. While others were saying yes to everything, they were saying yes to what mattered. While others were enabling through niceness, they were empowering through truth. Here's what nobody tells you about stopping being nice. You will lose relationships, but you'll gain your life back. Let me say it again. Brown wrote, "When we deny the story, it defines us. When we own the story, we can write a brave new ending." You've been denying the story that your niceness is self-protection. You've been pretending accommodation is virtue, and that denial has defined you as someone without boundaries, without authenticity, without genuine connection. But owning this truth gives you something niceness never could. The ability to have real relationships instead of comfortable performances. The ability to actually help people instead of enabling them. The ability to be authentic instead of agreeable. But stopping being nice won't make you more popular. It won't fit the good person narrative that nice culture celebrates. Instead, you'll disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. You'll upset people who preferred you never challenged them. You'll lose relationships that required your constant accommodation. And that's perfect, because those relationships were using you. not loving you. When you stop being nice, the people who leave were never really there. When you start being kind, the people who stay are worth keeping. Society celebrates niceness because nice people don't challenge dysfunction. They prove that maybe the problem isn't mean people who set boundaries. Maybe the problem is nice people who enable destruction while performing virtue. If you're someone who's exhausted from being nice, if your relationships feel shallow despite your accommodation, if you've been called selfish for having one boundary after years of having none, Brown would recognize you immediately. You're not mean. You're not selfish. You're not becoming a bad person. You're understanding that niceness is armor you've been using to avoid vulnerable authenticity, and that real kindness requires courage you've been calling mean. The question isn't whether you should be nicer. The question is whether you'll have the courage to stop being nice and start being kind. Because Brown was right about authenticity. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop being nice and start being honest. Even when nice people call that mean. The person who stops being nice isn't society's problem. They're proof that real kindness requires courage that niceness actively avoids. And that's exactly why nice people fear them. If this video made you see your niceness differently, or if you recognize the resentment of constant accommodation, let me know in the comments. What relationship got worse because you were too nice to be honest? And if you want more content that distinguishes real kindness from performed niceness, subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're just getting started with truths about authenticity that nice people don't want to hear.